23rd Lime Racing and Front Row have requested preliminary injunction to Racers charter teams despite not signing the charter agreement for 2025, and Sam Aaron Jr. Motorsports have lost their DQ appeal. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got on NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them trailers really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just show them straight to them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Williams-Walsh's 2024 Starkey Light Mode scheme that we'll see in the next couple races at Homestead, I believe Martinsville as well. Scheme looks alright in my opinion. I like the white truck. It does look pretty solid. Definitely looking forward to on the racetrack in the next couple of races. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is William Byers' 2024 Valvoline Celebration schemes that we'll see this weekend at Charlotte. I like this a lot. I like the Valvoline Celebration scheme. I love the colors, the confetti, among other things. It looks pretty good. Looking forward to on the racetrack this weekend at Charlotte. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Eric Almirola's 2024 Samaritan Purse scheme that we'll see this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. I do like the scheme a little bit. I do like the orange. I do like the white. I think there's a lot of good things about it. Looking forward to on the racetrack tomorrow afternoon at the Charlotte Roval. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Bilicki's 2024 NC Highway Patrol scheme that we'll see this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Scheme's okay in my opinion. It's alright. I do like the cause. It does look okay. Looking forward to on the racetrack this weekend at the Roval. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2024 Totina's Pizza Roll scheme that we'll see this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. I do like the scheme a lot. One of the better JTG Doherty schemes I've seen so far this year. The colors look pretty good. Definitely looking forward to on the racetrack this weekend at the Roval. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Dye's 2024 Trackside scheme that we'll see next weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Kev Trami will also be involved with the scheme. I do like it a lot. The colors look pretty solid on it for sure. There's good things about it, definitely. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack next weekend at Las Vegas. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Charlotte Roval purses for this weekend. So every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Race, Bob Pockers puts out the purse money for the event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $8,056,677. And for the Xfinity race, it's $1,419,755. Xfinity's got some decent money for this weekend, all things considered. And for Cup, having $8 million for the weekend, granted the charter system comes into play, which I think that purse money will be going up for the Cup Series next year, just a little bit, so the teams get a little more of that purse. But I do think the money is solid for Cup. I think Xfinity's got some decent money for sure. I think it's decent, and hopefully we can see some really good looking stuff from that going forward, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're unfortunately taking a sour note. As it was sadly announced yesterday that Ron Lewis has sadly passed away. Ron Lewis, for those who do not know, had been the spotter for Beard Motorsports for the last 8 years and has been a big part of this organization for many years and has been part of the sport for a very, very long time. I want to send my thoughts and condolences out to the Lewis family during their tragic time, thinking about the Ron Lewis family and also thinking about the Beard Motorsports family during a tragic time, thinking about everybody at this particular moment in this situation. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sage Karam. As it was announced yesterday that Sage Karam will drive the 07 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Sage Karam has played select starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series so far throughout the 2024 season. He's made some starts with some pretty solid organizations and has driven for, I believe, for Alpha Prime Racing a couple races so far this year and for Sam Hunt Racing. I think Sage is actually going to have a solid run. I know the 07 car is in a little bit of a danger zone when it comes to the owner's points currently at the moment, but I do think if there's anyone that can come behind the wheel and really help a program out, especially when it comes to road courses, I think Sage Karam is definitely the guy that can do it. So we'll see how he ends up doing, but I do think Sage Karam has a really solid chance and a really strong opportunity, and I do think he'll do a pretty solid and good job for sure this weekend. Looking forward to see what he can do at the Charlotte Roval this upcoming weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. Now, I did not see a lot of people talk about this story, but Stewart-Haas Racing announced on Wednesday evening that they have announced the final lap. Now, what does this mean? Well, Stewart-Haas Racing is going to be revealing a lot of their favorite paint schemes that they have had through the years, and some fans can also, I think, vote on some of the best paint schemes that Stewart-Haas Racing has had. Remember, Stewart-Haas Racing will be shutting down at the end of this season in the next 4 to 5 weeks. As a matter of fact, I know some have said they were going to be rebranding, but no, they're shutting the organization down altogether at the end of this year. All the drivers, of course, are expected to find rides. Ryan Preece is most likely going to RFK Racing for the 2025 season. Josh Berry is going to the Wood Brothers. Chase Briscoe is going to the 14 car. And, of course, we do know the other driver that team has found is going to go to Front Row Motorsports, that being Noah Gragson, we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But I think it's cool they're doing some sort of promotion like this for the final time. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense to do it. I think it's a great decision for sure, and I'm definitely looking forward to see what they're going to end up doing in regards to that. But I think it's also really exciting they're doing that, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports and SMI. As it was announced yesterday early afternoon, the Hendrick Motorsports and SMI have built the 10/10 Motor Club. This is a road course type track that is outside of the Charlotte Motor Speedway, and it's going to have 3 different road courses around it. I think it's going to have a 1.3 mile track. I think it's going to have a 19 turn course and a 17 turn course as well. It's going to have a lot of hospitality. It's basically going to be hosted for events and I think testing as well at the track, or maybe like Garage 56 perhaps, which is rumored that it could come back at some point in the future, and other little bit of events as well. It only has a seating capacity of 1,500. I've seen some people theorize that maybe perhaps we could see Hendrick and basically maybe a road course race for the Cup Series in the future of this track. Unless they could find a way to build a lot more capacity and turn it into an actual racetrack, I don't think this track will ever host a road course race unless it wants to be like the Thermal Club perhaps, where you have to pay a ton of money to go to like the Thermal Club, even though I do think tickets for next year are going to be cheaper, considering it is going to be a points-paying event next year. But I think this is really exciting and really great to see that they are doing this. I think that they're having a track outside for testing, among other things, having a track for like events especially, and maybe like some historic races. I think that is a really good thing in my opinion. I'm glad they're doing this. I think this is really exciting stuff for sure, and I'm looking forward to see how this kind of plays out. Looking forward to it and really glad to see. I think, again, it's just pretty cool that they're built this up, and I think it's pretty cool they're doing this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Travis Mack. As it was confirmed by Bob Pockrass yesterday that Travis Mack will be the crew chief for Shane Van Gisbergen this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be racing the NASCAR Cup Series race, driving the number 13 car, and we were wondering if he was going to get the number 13 crew, that Andrew Dickinson is a crew chief and all those people, or if he was going to get the Trackhouse crew that he has had the last couple times he's raced. Well, he is going to be working with the same people that he has been working at. I'm a little bit surprised then. Why would you put him in the number 13 car and not just move into the 16 car if Travis Mack's going to be the crew chief on this car? Now, I will say this. I do think that this gives SVG a really big advantage because the Trackhouse or paired entries have looked a lot faster, especially on the road courses. And Ross, just saying, someone brought this up, has had the best average running position on road courses so far this year. Of course, he's not won one, but he could have won Watkins Glen. But SVG's the third best when it comes to average running position throughout the whole entire event when he's actually not getting crashed out on a road course. I do believe that next year or this year, I think that he's done a really good job. And I think having Travis Mack as a crew chief does make a lot of sense. I just wish he was in the 16 instead of the 13. But I do think he's going to have a good chance and opportunity to win. I think he's going to be very fast, very, very competitive. And I'm glad to see that Travis Mack is going to get to work with him. So everyone from the organization and team gets to work together and keep doing the same things that they've been able to do. And I think it's really good they're doing that, putting them all together, not having like a college crew work with him because he's under Trackhouse's contract. I think they should have done it originally like this, but I'm not shocked they're doing that, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Louis Foster. As it was announced Wednesday morning that Louis Foster will be joining Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing starting in 2025 and has signed a multi-year contract with Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. Now, the number race that he'll be running in 2025 is still undetermined. We don't know what number he will be driving for in 2025. But I do believe that he will be running in the Indianapolis 500 in one of their cars. There are rumors of drivers like Brandis VK perhaps coming over to this organization for next year, and we still don't know if Pietro Fittipaldi or Yuri Vips are going to end up having rides with this team for 2025. But this is a really great move from Rahal Letterman Lanigan to bring in Louis Foster. Louis Foster had a dominant season in the Indy Lights Series, and I do believe that the driver who wins the Indy Lights Championship deserves to be in IndyCar full-time. And I'm glad to see that we're kind of seeing this again. This has been a big problem the last couple of years. Linus Lundqvist took him 2 years to get to IndyCar. We don't even know if he's going to be in IndyCar at all in 2025 at this point. Seems like the rides are drying up very quickly. We don't know what his future's like, but I do think he should be personally in IndyCar. But I do think that Louis Foster is a really good driver and a really solid driver in the lower series. So I do think he's earned the right and opportunity to get a chance to do this. I really hope that he can be very, very competitive because I want to see him do well with Rahal. Rahal's been hit or miss at times. I know Christian Lundgaard, obviously he's left the organization, go Aaron McLaren, but he did a really good job with the team for the last few years. Of course, he won at Toronto in 2023, and I think that he's been a really solid driver for the team for the last couple of years. So nonetheless, really glad to see they're making this move to bring Louis Foster in. I think he's done a really solid job with the team for the last few years, and I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table for the team going forward into the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about 2026 IndyCar. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern on Wednesday afternoon or evening that IndyCar is in advanced talks to potentially go to Mexico City in 2026. In addition to that, it was also reported later that evening that they are working on a blockbuster event that is going to take place on the West Coast. They are not planning to do a race as of now on the Northeast for 2026, but they're looking at doing a pretty big blockbuster event. Let's talk about Mexico City. Not NASCAR, but IndyCar has been looking to go outside of the U.S. now for nearly a decade or so, outside of going to Toronto. And they've been looking to go outside and go to Mexico for really the last 4 or 5 years. But obviously that has not happened at this point. But there is a lot of pressure, considering that NASCAR will be having a race in Mexico City on the Autodromo Hernando Rodriguez track. There is a lot of pressure on IndyCar right now to try to find a way to get to Mexico as well. Considering you have Pat O'Ward, who is a super popular driver, and a lot of people, with him being the most popular driver in IndyCar currently at the moment, I think having a race around him makes a ton of sense. I think having a race though in Texas is cool, even though I do think the track actually looks solid, all things considered. It is a street course. And I think having a racetrack in Mexico City, for example, going there would make a ton of sense. So I really hope they can get out to Mexico City. Moving on to this blockbuster event, there have been rumors about Denver potentially hosting an IndyCar race in 2026. That's not technically on the West Coast, but I'd have to imagine that's what they're kind of talking about, considering they have sponsors out in Denver with Arrow, so it would definitely make a lot of sense. Maybe they're looking to do a race in San Diego, perhaps. Maybe San Jose. They're obviously not going to go to Auto Club because Auto Club's not available right now at the moment. Maybe they're going to try that at this point. I really don't know. But I'm very intrigued to see what this blockbuster event they are going to have. And I really hope this blockbuster event can be really good for IndyCar so that we can get some good race in there. So we'll see what happens and what they end up doing for 2026. We at least have one new race. I really hope we can end up having a few more new races going into the future, because the more new races that you can end up happening and having, the better I think it's going to be for everybody. So I hope it can be a big thing and help IndyCar grow going into the future, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Sieg and Kyle Sieg. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that Ryan Sieg and Kyle Sieg will be swapping numbers and rides for the remainder of 2024. Kyle Sieg will move from the number 28 car and will move over to the number 39 car for the remainder of this season, while Ryan Sieg moves away from the number 39 car and moves over to the number 28 for the remainder of 2024. As you probably saw in the press release as well, the reason that they're doing this is to try to help them in the owner's points. The 39 car is really good, in a good position. It's not going to fall outside of the top 31 or top 32 in the owner's points, so it's not going to be in jeopardy of missing races, and Kyle will probably do solid in that ride. They're helping the 28 car because the 28 car is not in a good position in owner's points currently at the moment. I believe right now it's like 29th or 30th in the owner's points, so they're trying to get that number up a little bit higher, and also they're trying to get in a position to maybe where it can finish inside the top 20 in the standings, to where if you finish in the top 20, you get some bonus money in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. So I do think that's another big reason why they are making this move, and to me, it does make a lot of sense, and I do like this move from the organization to do this, because I think having both rides around and both of them running up competitively is really good and really, really smart. We've seen this before too. Bubba Wallace basically drove the 45 car after Kurt Busch sat out for many, many weeks, and Ty Gibbs, of course, took over the 23 for a lot of the remainder of the season after the playoffs started. Bubba then, of course, won the 45 car at the end of the year. And then, of course, we've seen this in the past too in Xfinity and a couple of other things as well. So this is not a new phenomenon that we are seeing. I do think it's a good move, though, to really help the organization and program, and I do think it'll be really good to help them grow going forward in the future. And I think it's a good decision, a really good car to go ahead and do this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar once again. As it was reported by Adam Stern last night, the IndyCar was offered more money by a different network than it got from Fox. But they decided to take Fox because they would get a lot more exposure. This is definitely really interesting. Obviously, the IndyCar will be going to Fox Sports starting in 2025. We're going to talk about them here when it comes to the remote broadcast in just a little bit with NASCAR. But I do think that them going to IndyCar and Fox, I do think when it comes to IndyCar and Fox, I think they are going to care a lot more about IndyCar. They are going to put a lot more work into it, in my opinion, and they're probably going to do a lot better than they've done with NASCAR. It's no secret that Fox does not care about IndyCar or NASCAR anymore. They have really not put the work on their NASCAR broadcasts anymore. They're on remote broadcasts for the Truck Series, and they've gotten rid of their Race Hub show in the last year or so. They just simply do not give a crap at all, and Shannon Spake's no longer working at Fox. So obviously, they don't really care as much. I have to theorize that might have been maybe Amazon perhaps was looking to get him. I'd have to think maybe NBC was trying to get him back. I imagine NBC was trying to find a way to bring more money so they could stick around. And there are probably other networks and maybe even some other companies that were looking to pick them up, like Amazon, for example, or maybe something like Twitch or something was looking to pick them up. But obviously, Fox is going to give you the best exposure, and they're probably going to promote the IndyCar series during Super Bowl time, which to me, that's a really good thing to grow IndyCar. So I think that does make a little bit of sense. It does clear that up a little bit. There were rumors, like I said, about NBC trying to bring in more money to kind of keep them around, but obviously they weren't getting as much exposure from NBC. Even though I do think in Indy Lights series will probably be on FS1, FS2. That's still a series will actually grow a little bit as well. Being there, we'll probably be able to catch some of those races going forward. But I do think it does make a lot of sense what they're doing. But at the same time, it's kind of disappointing they kind of went the cheap route to grow on Fox. But I also do understand why they decided to go ahead and do that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Haas F1. As it was shockingly announced last night, the Haas F1 has partnered up with Toyota Gazoo Racing effective immediately. They are forming a technical alliance going forward into Formula One. Now, I do not believe with this technical announcement that they are switching out of Ferrari. I do believe they're going to be sticking around with Ferrari going forward, but Toyota Gazoo, I think, will just have stickers or something along those lines on their cars. Kind of like how Haas has a technical alliance, I think, with the Pratt Miller organization in IMSA, if I'm not mistaken. They have a technical alliance there, but this is absolutely huge because this could mean coming down the road, and maybe in the future, that Toyota could find their way into working in the Formula One. But I also do think this has repercussions potentially for their NASCAR program. I would not be shocked or surprised if Haas factory team on the NASCAR side in 2026 switches over to Toyota. Now, granted, we've seen this in the past, obviously, with their NASCAR program with Ford. They, of course, had Ferrari engines in Formula One. But I would not be surprised or shocked if you see them work basically with another manufacturer, perhaps. Again, there are obviously rumors about Stewart-Haas Racing at one point, going back to Chevrolet, maybe Honda coming into play. Maybe they had heard that maybe they're looking to switch to Toyota, perhaps. But now it does sound like at this particular point that they are going to maybe in the future switch to Toyota. But I think this is really huge for Formula One. Toyota has not been part of Formula One in many, many years. And I think them coming back to Formula One is absolutely massive and really huge for the branding. So I think this is a great move nonetheless for the sport and for the manufacturer itself. I love they're doing this. I love they're coming back. I really hope this can lead to a lot of success going down the road. And maybe, just maybe, we could see, because they're making big moves over at Haas. They're trying to get better. They're going to have Nico Hulkenberg next year, which I think is really huge. And they're going to have Esteban Ocon at the team next year. As you know, Nico Hulkenberg is going to another team, but they're going to have Esteban Ocon. They're going to have Ali Behrman. And having Toyota now involved is really, really huge. And like I said, one of my theories is that their NASCAR program is eventually going to switch over to Toyota in the next couple years because of this move. I think this is really huge for the Haas F1 program to bring Toyota in. And it's going to be more money coming into the team as well, most likely, likely, which I don't think not having less money is a bad thing. I think bringing more money in is a really good thing for the team. So I'm really excited about this for Haas. I think this is really, really huge, and I think getting Toyota to get involved in your organization, I think is massive and really huge for the organization overall. To be perfectly honest with you, really exciting and really great stuff overall. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rockingham Speedway. As it was announced yesterday that the ARCA E-Series will be racing at Rockingham Speedway on Easter weekend. They will join the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series and the NASCAR Xfinity Series for 2025. I believe the Truck Series will either be racing on Friday night or Saturday afternoon. ARCA East, I think, will race around that same time. And then, of course, the Xfinity Series will be the headline event. The NASCAR Cup Series, of course, will not be racing there in 2025. Even though the fact they keep adding new series for 2025 tells me within the next year or so, they're probably going to bring the Cup Series back there most likely in 2026. And if they do bring the Cup Series back, it'll be the first time since 2004, I believe, the last time the Cup Series racer had the great photo finish between Matt Kenseth and Casey Kane, and of course had Jay McMurray right behind him, battling for the win as well. But I think Rockingham going to ARCA East makes a lot of sense, and I think you're going to see a lot of big names in the Truck Series and even the Xfinity Series potentially go down and run. I'd imagine Grant Enfinger most likely is going to run the ARCA East race, and you're probably going to see a few big names, like I said, go out there and run, meaning that the ARCA East field and the competition down there is going to be a lot bigger. But I think this is really exciting for ARCA East. I think the ARCA East Series has not raced here since the late 2000s, if I'm not mistaken, so I think having this series come back and race is absolutely huge. Actually, I think it was 2011, 2012, last time they raced. But I would love to see the Cup Series in the future get back to Rockingham Speedway. I think it'd be really huge for the track, and I think it'd be massive and major for this series as a whole. So I really hope it ends up happening where we get to see this move happen. I think it'd be huge for the sport, for NASCAR Cup racing to go back there. But I think this also is massive and really, really huge for the ARCA East Series. They're going to have a track on their own that they can use. I think it's going to create some really exciting racing for sure. And I think we're going to see some really great, basically ARCA East racing, some really exciting other racing as well. And just having Rockingham back on the schedule is great. I'd love to see guys like Kyle Larson come out to the event, maybe Haley Deegan perhaps, or some other drivers like Carl or someone else come back out of retirement and race this event. But I think Rockingham Speedway coming back on the schedule is really, really huge. And I think the ARCA East Series racing there is really exciting and really awesome stuff. Overall, really looking forward to see this. And I think it's pretty great this is happening overall, that Rockingham will be hosting the ARCA East Series in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the damage vehicle policy once again. One of the biggest topics that's been going around over the last week or so, really the last couple weeks especially, has been the damaged vehicle policy. If you watch the NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega Super Speedway or watch Kansas, for example, Josh Berry basically got taken out of the race because he was considered involved in the wreck, even though he just needed 4 fresh tires to get back into the race. When we go to Talladega, there's a huge big wreck that takes place, the biggest wreck in NASCAR Cup Series history, where 28 cars are involved. And they tow back Chase Elliott, Chase Briscoe, and Harrison Burton back to pit road. And you could definitely tell in his, basically after getting out of the infield care center, that Josh Berry was definitely frustrated, justifiably so. Now, NASCAR basically then responded, and they did say that they were looking to make some changes, but basically, Ellen Sawyer said they've kept the rules the same. Now, Chris Gabehart went on Sirius 7 NASCAR Radio yesterday, and they apparently had a meeting with NASCAR, the teams did. And NASCAR said that they are planning to maybe loosen up the damaged vehicle policy rules going forward. What do I mean by that? Well, I think that they're going to kind of do the same, maybe the same policy they had at Talladega Super Speedway, to where if you're involved in a wreck and they can bring you back to pit road, which I think is the way to do it. If it takes an extra caution lap or something like that just to get the vehicles towed back there, that is perfectly fine. I don't think NASCAR should be making the decision on whether you're out of the race or not. Officials are especially. I think the teams should be the ones making the decision. I personally think, though, that when it comes to damaged vehicle policy, I think it needs to go away altogether. I think a damaged vehicle policy has caused more headaches in the last 7-8 years since it came into play than it's caused more solutions. We saw this in Matt Kenseth back in 2017. Matt Kenseth got taken out of the race because too many crew members were over the wall. And then they kind of changed the rule that if you had too many men over the wall during DVP, you got a 2-lap penalty. I think that one of the biggest solutions is getting rid of DVP altogether to where you get a one-shot policy. If you go to the garage, you can repair it, come back out on the track, and it can create a big storyline for fans watching as well. I think having that storyline will keep fans very intrigued and very, very excited about the drivers, and it can be good for ratings. It creates storyline for us to cover the sport and keeps the storyline continuing on as it progresses. I think that's the way it should be. Do I think they're going to do that? I don't know. But I think the backlash toward the damaged vehicle policy in recent years has been very, very significant, especially with these cars, because the reason they got towed back is they have flat tires, and when you have flat tires in this car, you basically have a beach whale. So personally, I think getting rid of damaged vehicle policy should be the way to go. Are they going to do that? Probably not, but I think that'd be the way to go, in my opinion, is getting rid of the damaged vehicle policy. That should be the way they do it, and I really hope they get rid of it, but personally, like I said, I don't think they're going to get rid of the damaged vehicle policy, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the CW. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Wednesday afternoon that the CW is considering having its NASCAR booth call some races remotely from the new NASCAR production facility in Charlotte, North Carolina, per sources that have told them. Obviously, the NASCAR Xfinity Series will be going to the CW, and they've already been working on the CW, and there's already been a little bit of a negative reception toward the CW. But if they decide to do this, to where they have remote races, you're going to have less fans tuning in. If you have watched the Fox truck broadcast this year, they have been an absolute train wreck, and they have been an absolute joke. You can definitely tell when they're at the track and when they're not at the track. And they really stopped going to the track once the Cup Series portion of the year ends up going away, which of course for next year is going to be earlier in the year. So Charlotte is going to be the first time they're most likely going to have a remote booth, even though they're literally about a mile or two away. You can definitely tell how bad the broadcasts have been. They're disjointed. And you don't get that energy when they're not at the track. We have seen this though in college sports, right? Where college sports are starting to do this, and you can definitely tell those broadcasts are not as good. I might be old school, and I might have an old school thinking of ways, but I think being at the racetrack is the way it should be. And Dale Jr. agrees with us too, by the way, on that. He thinks we should all be at the racetrack when we're covering a race. I don't think that they're probably going to have pit reporters, right? Now, it could just be for like tracks like Portland or for Sonoma, and it's like whatever, I guess, because it's a road course perhaps and it's out on the West Coast. They don't want to travel for one race. Fair, I can understand that a little bit, but I still think it doesn't matter what type of track and where you're at. You should be at the racetrack for basically the fans and how the atmosphere and the energy and all that stuff. When you're not at the racetrack, you can definitely tell how bad it is. Now, to be fair, NBC, they did this with their Formula One coverage, and it wasn't that bad, to be honest, but I think being at the track is the way to go. That's how it should be. I don't understand why these networks feel like they need to save money like that. There's other ways you can save money, but basically cost cutting in that area is not the way to go, in my opinion. That is not the solution to fixing the problem. You want good broadcast, you need to be at the racetrack. That is how it should be. I don't understand, like I said, why you have all these networks and executives in these places especially that are doing this. The CW has not been off to a good foot so far. Obviously, there's a lot of areas that can't get the CW. There's no app to watch races at the moment. So you can't, if you're in an area that's affected, they can choose what broadcasts you watch. And to me, that's not fair. They've got to change things up going forward when it comes to it. And I think having remote broadcasts is not the solution to fixing the problem. There's a lot of things that NASCAR and all these networks can do, but I think having a remote broadcast is not the way to go, and it's not the solution, to be perfectly honest with you. I really hope they don't do this. I agree with Dale Jr. They should not do this, which is why Jr. is not going to the CW, because they're considering this. I think it'd be one of the dumbest things that they have done if they decide to go to a remote booth, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking a little bit about silly season once again. Now, if you've been on Instagram over the course of the last couple of days, you have probably seen some stuff from an account called NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia. Now, NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia does get some things right from time to time for sure, but also does get some things wrong. They also report on some very intriguing silly season stuff from time to time. Let's begin from the report's report on Wednesday. It was reported by them that it looks like Spire could potentially have a fourth part-time entry in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. Now, the number at this time has not been announced what they are going to use for 2025. I have a little bit of a theory. The number they might use is the number 07. The 07 is a number that has not been used in the NASCAR Cup Series, I believe, since the early 2010s or the late 2010s when RCR had this 07 car. So maybe that's the number they're going to use. Maybe they use a 74 perhaps. That number hasn't been used in a couple years in the Cup Series. Maybe they can find a way to get the 78, even though that might be the number that 2311 does end up using for their Cup car when a Martin Truex Jr. does end up racing. So maybe the 07 car. Now, who could be the driver? I would have to assume maybe Roger Carruth could get a chance and opportunity in this seat. Maybe someone like a Matt DiBenedetto, maybe Haley Deegan if they want to do that. Maybe they get someone like outside of the world of their racing. Maybe they get someone outside of the NASCAR world. Maybe Colton Herta perhaps. Maybe some other drivers come into play. Maybe like that. That could definitely be very interesting on that car. Maybe this is like going to be the new Project 91 and they're going to bring drivers from the outside NASCAR world into this car. That could definitely be a major possibility. But continuing on, yesterday, they kind of talked about the Truck Series program a little bit. They confirmed something that we have been hearing. It sounds like Rev Racing and Chase Purdy more than likely are going to be out of this team in 2025. Rev Racing does not shock me. They're likely moving up with Nick Sanchez in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Obviously, Nick Sanchez is going to be driving for Big Machine Racing. And it sounds like Rev Racing more than likely is going to be working a lot closer with Big Machine Racing for 2025. So no surprises there. Chase Purdy leaving the team is definitely a little bit shocking considering he does bring some money to the organization, but let's be real and honest, Chase Purdy has definitely struggled with SHR Motorsports this year. Now, I do not know where he goes. Maybe he goes back to Mackinelli-Hilgeman Racing or goes there next year. That could certainly be a possibility considering he's under contract with Chevrolet, so maybe he goes to Mackinelli-Hilgeman. There's some drivers that we don't know who's going to be there next year. We had thought maybe Connor Hall could go there, but he's, of course, driving full-time next year for Junior Motorsports in the late model program, though he might drive part-time in one of their trucks next year. That could certainly be a possibility. But they confirmed that Roger Carruth most likely will be back in the Truck Series next year with the team. Not a shocker there. Roger Carruth, I think, has a multi-year contract with SHR Motorsports. Roger's been very, very solid this year in the Truck Series, has a chance to make the Championship 4, has been running solid this year, and of course got a win early in the year at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Roger sticking around absolutely makes a lot of sense to continue going. But they mentioned 3 other names as well. Kaz Grala, Andres Perez, and Brendan Queen. Let's start with Andres Perez de Laura. I think he most likely will be with this team next year. I've heard his name mentioned as a possibility for this organization. It sounds like he's moving up full-time to the Truck Series next year, and I think he'll be with SHR. SHR, he's made a start with them earlier this year. I think he's a really solid driver. I know he won the ARCA championship. Yes, it wasn't the most exciting championship in the world. I thought maybe Rev Racing would still be involved in some sort of capacity. So my guess is most likely he's going to drive like the 8 or 9 or some other number that they end up choosing for 2025. Kaz Grala is definitely very interesting because it's obviously rumored that Rick Ware is going to sell off one of their charters, or at least one of their charters, over to RFK Racing for Ryan Preece to drive next year. So Kaz Grala then would not have a ride to go to next year, even though it does sound like they're going to have an open seat for 2025, Rick Ware. But him going to SHR would be a really good decision for his career. I think going to SHR would give him a great chance and opportunity, and I think he'd be certainly very fast and super competitive. He's been good with good organizations. He's shown himself out. So I think Kaz Grala getting a chance here would be exciting. Brendan Butterby Queen would be a really great move in my opinion. He's been solid in his select Truck Series starts. I know Kansas did not go well for him, but I do think he would be a really good candidate for this team next year, and that would be a very interesting move. Speaking of silly season, there also is expected to be another SHR truck. Kyle Busch most likely behind the wheel of this truck. Maybe Kyle Larson, maybe Connor Zillage, Daniel Swartz, or some other names that could get behind the wheel. Maybe Shane Van Gisbergen perhaps could get a chance behind the wheel. That could certainly definitely be very interesting. Now, obviously, there's some other silly season stuff we don't know at this time. RFK is expected to have a third car for Ryan Preece next year. 2311 Front Row will be expanding to 3-car operations going into next year. We do know Zane Smith most likely be behind the wheel of one of those cars, that being the front row car, and Riley Hurst most likely be behind the wheel of the other seat. We know some other drivers don't know what they're doing at this point. Haley Deegan had been mentioned for the Haas factory team at one point, but she's obviously not going there, so obviously I think she's out of NASCAR at this point, probably going down the IndyCar row or going to Nitrocross most likely, so we'll see what happens there. There's some other drivers I mentioned. I know I talked about Carl a little bit. I know Denny said they have the car ready for him. If they can find a way to get the horsepower up, we might see Carl Edwards get involved there. Silly season is going to be definitely interesting for sure, and we'll see how it progresses and plays out throughout the rest of 2024 going into 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Sam Mayer and Junior Motorsports. We did a story and video talking about this a couple days ago, but it was confirmed on Wednesday afternoon that Sam Mayer and Junior Motorsports have lost their disqualification appeal. And it was also confirmed by Bob Pockers and all reporters out there, there are no further appeals coming down the pipeline. According to, I think, Rule 17.4.3.2.2.1 or something like that, basically the back bumper had to be on the car, and their car was too low in heights. Remember, it was announced after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race had concluded after inspection and got through that Sam Mayer Junior Motorsports had been disqualified, meaning Sam Mayer had dropped from being 10 points above the cutoff line to now being 13 points below the cutoff line, meaning Sam Mayer was going into the race almost in a must-win situation, considering he's going up against guys like Shane Van Gisbergen, Justin Allgaier, and AJ Allmendinger, who are all really good road course racers. Granted, for Sam Mayer, he's also a really good road racer as well. They had their appeal a couple days ago, and unfortunately, they lost their appeal. The people on the panel were Dixon Johnson, Bill Mullis, who you've probably seen a lot of times, and Sean Robinson, who's also been on a ton of appeal panels as well. Now, obviously, Dale Jr. did respond to the situation. They said that they basically provided a ton of evidence out to them to kind of prove that they really weren't cheating in that situation. I believe Sam Mayer had gotten caught up in the big incident that took place with a few laps to go, and there's really not much he can do in that situation. I know some, like I said, are they going to go to a final appeal officer? No, they're done. So now the main focus for Sam Mayer going into this weekend at the Charlotte Roval is to try to go out there and win the race. Now, good thing for Sam Mayer, he is the defending winner at the Charlotte Roval. The problem is, there's two big-name drivers that are going to be racing. That is AJ Allmendinger, who has never lost a race at the Roval in all the races that he has ran. And, of course, you do have Shane Van Gisbergen, who is one of the best road course racers in NASCAR today. He's actually going for the double, and I think he's got a really good chance to sweep this weekend, considering the fact that Shane Van Gisbergen has won 3 Xfinity road course races and nearly won at Watkins Glen the last time he raced on a road course in the NASCAR Cup Series. So I think there's a really good chance that he's going to get beat there. But I think 13 points is going to be made up. So what is the strategy if you are Sam Mayer? Well, Sam Mayer has to be thinking we need to get as many points as possible. So I do think he is going to sacrifice maybe going for the win at one point to go for stage points. I think he will try to at least in one of the stages go for stage points. And then in the second stage, probably just come to pit road because I think at that point he'll be focused on trying to win. Now, the big thing for him is that he's going to be not going up against, like I said, SVG or Justin Allgaier, those guys, which 13 points is definitely make upable. But I think you look at how this race is shaping up to be. And I think the Xfinity race is going to be the most exciting race of the weekend because this appeal and a disqualification has really changed the game for how the Xfinity Series playoff race, I think, is going to end up going. And I think it's going to be exciting. I think the fans are going to be in for a show and a treat. The Xfinity Series road course racing this year has been honestly really fun. I thought the race at Watkins Glen, yes, it was dominated by Connor Zilisch for the most part, but I thought the racing behind was really entertaining and fun, especially up front for the lead. That Chicago street course race, that battle between SVG and Kyle Larson, one of the greatest battles I think I've ever seen throughout a race, that lasted almost half the race, which was so exciting and fun. One of the greatest races I think I've ever seen in my life. And just seeing so many good Xfinity road course races have been really intriguing. At this point for Sam Mayer, you don't go thinking you need to win, but you need to kind of have that mentality. I need to be in position to be there to contend for the win. I know that there's been times where these kind of appeals have kind of gone the other direction. We've seen Noah Gragson, of course, win his disqualification appeal and was able to get his position back. There's been other times where we've seen appeals rescinded. Of course, William Byron kind of won his appeal a couple years ago when he dumped Denny Hamlin, even though he probably shouldn't have won his appeal in that situation. We've all seen Hendrick Motorsports win their massive appeal last year with the Louver Gate, where Hendrick Motorsports, all 4 drivers, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, William Byron, and of course Alex Bowman, all were able to go out there and win their appeal. So I think overall, when you look at this situation, I do think that there's a lot of things that have gone in the right direction for everybody over there at that point. But I think when it comes to this, I didn't think they were really going to have a case to stand on. It was going to be really tough for them to win. I know that they were going to present the evidence, which I can't blame them for presenting the evidence to try to go out there and win. But I think it was going to be very difficult for them to win. So I'm not shocked and surprised to see that they unfortunately did not end up winning their appeal. I feel bad for JRM in this situation, but it is what it is. The rules are rules, I guess. And now we move on to the future. And now they've got to focus on trying to go out there and win. That's all they can do at this point is focus on trying to win the Charlotte Roval this weekend. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports once again. As it was officially confirmed a couple days ago on Wednesday that 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports have confirmed that they have requested preliminary injunction to race in 2025. They wrote a letter basically saying that they had planned to race in 2025, whether they are a charter team or not, but they're hoping to basically have charters, well, not have charters, but basically race as a charter team, even though they did not sign the charter agreement for 2025, while the lawsuit is currently going on at this moment. After this had come out, Bob Pockrass put out a very interesting thread surrounding some letters that were sent to the teams and organizations back and forth. First, we had a letter, I think, from the team sending a letter to Steve Phelps, confirming they had not signed the charter agreement around the municipalistic practices, and they also wrote some guidelines on some things that they wanted to end up being done. 8 very interesting things. More money coming into the teams, which, of course, they've been granted more money, and there's some other things as well. Steve Phelps then did respond to them in these letters and basically confirmed that they are going to be getting more money. It was also confirmed in these letters as well, something Jordan Bianchi had reported on the teardown on Sunday night, that the teams are going to get the most of the money, which we don't know what percentage they are getting, but they are expected to get most of the money in the charter agreement, which I think that's a step in the right direction. They also did say when it comes to manipulative practices, they said that's not really true. They don't agree with the manipulative practices as well, which I can understand. NASCAR is basically going to defend that in that area. The teams then responded, but also he did say that they're only going to use the IPs and kind of like the way they've been doing them before. I don't know how truthful that is or not, but I don't know if someone is lying or telling the truth in that situation. The letters, though, were very interesting. There was a lot of very interesting pillars coming around about governance in the sport, among other things. And NASCAR did confirm as well they are not planning to give the teams governance in sport, and they could not hand out permanent charters with the media rights deal, among other things. Continuing on, there's some interesting things noted by Bob Pockrass also. He says teams say the Daytona 500 is 15% of the purse for the whole entire year on how much they end up making. That is absolutely wild. Nearly a fifth of the budget that teams end up making for the year comes from the Daytona 500. That is absolutely wild. It was also confirmed, like I said, that 23XI and Front Row are expected to have 3-car teams for next year. Basically, I think 23XI said they needed like 100 extra employees, though they are hiring employees for 2025 at this time. I think Front Row also mentioned it's going to cost a ton of money to go ahead and have that as well. Now, moving on when it comes to the hearing, there's some interesting things in regards to the hearing that are going on. Basically, the hearing was expected to take place on October 28th. That is actually moved to November 4th. The judge has granted NASCAR to that, and that has been moved to November 4th when it comes to the hearing. Now, Bob Pockrass had clarified something this morning in regards to the preliminary injunction, among other things. NASCAR still has to respond by Wednesday, by the way. They have until Wednesday to respond to the team's preliminary injunction, which in the letters, NASCAR says that they're basically going to try to oppose this. They asked for a delay, and they are planning to oppose the preliminary injunction. Obviously, there's some things, like I said, were clarified this morning. Bob said on October 23rd, the team, basically, they've gotten that move, and they have to move that to that point. Obviously, November 4th is very interesting, considering that is going to be during championship weekend, which I think, unfortunately, that is going to overshadow the championship weekend, sadly, which, let's be real and honest, the championship has lost so much value as it is. I really wouldn't mind this kind of overshadowing it, even though it is frustrating for us that do cover the sport a little bit. Obviously, when I read the documents in the letter, both do have a little bit of a case in this. Obviously, the teams in 24XI Front Row, in their side of things, they want governance, they want permanent charters, so they can have an investment there, which I don't blame them for that. Now, if they do get preliminary injunction and they are allowed to access that preliminary injunction, they will be able to run next year in 2025 while the lawsuit is going on, meaning no issues for the team. If they aren't allowed to be granted preliminary injunction for Michael Jordan's team and all that stuff, this would mean that they will have to run most likely as open teams. The fact that they've been able to delay it is definitely very interesting. But also, they want to go to Discovery pretty much immediately. And I didn't mention this either, but they want to have access to 6 NASCAR officials who work as higher ups. Jim France, Lisa France Kennedy, Ben Kennedy, I also believe Steve Phelps, Steve O'Donnell, and I think there was another individual, I can't remember his name. They want access to the court documents as well when it comes to money. I think that they've all been kind of handling it very professionally, but I think once we do get into the courtroom, which I don't think NASCAR wants to go to court, by the way, that's not what they want to do, but they may have to go to court. They may not have any choice. And you look at the situation, right, when you look at this has been one of the wildest stories of the year, one of the craziest stories, I think, because I don't think anybody coming into this year thought with the charters that everyone was going to be able to get along and everything was going to get settled. But obviously, that wasn't the case. NASCAR also did provide a timeline on negotiations and meeting the teams, which, by the way, they did meet the teams, but they also confirmed that they did send the letter as well. They didn't say there was a midnight deadline, even though a lot of team owners, including Rich Schultz, did say there was a midnight deadline there. But now going to the future for 2311 racing, and Front Row especially, I do think that this has a very big impact on the future of these teams if they aren't able to run. It could mean St. Smith's future is affected, other drivers are affected in the future for the team. But I do, and Front Row even said, and Bob Jenkins said that if they can run as an open team for as long as they can, but they can't run viably and financially, they'll just have to shut down altogether. That's why they want this preliminary injunction. And it makes a lot of sense, right? They want to be able to have money so they can compete full time. When you don't have a charter in the sport, that's less money coming towards you, and that means there's less going to be headed your way because if you don't get as much of the purse money. Now, what does it mean for those charters if they are rejected? Maybe a team like Junior Motorsports comes in and swipes them up. Maybe Spire comes and buys one, perhaps. Like I said, there's rumors of a fourth Spire car coming into play. Maybe we see a team swipe up those charters, but I'd have to imagine that NASCAR they got to respond in the next couple days, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this thing plays out. There's going to be more information coming out as time progresses and goes on. I think there'll be a lot of interesting things coming around this, and I think it'll be really fun to see how this ends up playing out going forward and as it goes along. So we'll see how it ends up playing out, and we'll see how it works out for them, especially accomplishment. Other things, Harry Crablish was rumored to see at one point, but I think it's very interesting to see how things play out and see how things continue when it comes to these charter things going forward into the future. So, that is going to today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think that 2311 and Front Row will get what they want or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Sam Mayer and Junior Motorsports losing their appeal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I don't think there's any more content dropping on the channel today. Tomorrow on the channel, we'll, of course, have reactions to Cup qualifying, Xfinity qualifying. We'll have SVG videos dropping, of course, all weekend as well. And we'll, of course, have race reviews for all the races coming up. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.